Have you ever wondered what happens inside someone's mind when one day you simply disappear? No final argument, no long goodbye, no desperate message asking them to understand you. You just stop. At first, they may think they won. They may even feel relieved. But then something happens that they never expected, because the person who was always there is suddenly nowhere to be found. And that's when their mind begins to turn against them. They will pass through 10 emotional stages: rejection, curiosity, regret, fear, and eventually, something far more painful than simply missing you. But the 10th stage is different, because by the time they reach it, you may no longer care whether they miss you at all. And that is where Stoicism begins. The first shock, they lose access to you. The first thing they feel isn't love. It isn't regret. It's disruption. Because people rarely understand the value of constant access until that access disappears. Think about it. For months, maybe years, they knew you would answer. They could ignore your message for 6 hours, and somehow, you would still answer theirs in 6 minutes. They could cancel plans, become distant, give you half their attention, and somewhere inside them, there was a quiet certainty. You'll still be there. That's what made your presence invisible. Not because you had no value, but because you had become predictable. Then one day, the pattern breaks. The message doesn't arrive. The phone doesn't ring. You don't ask what's wrong. You don't explain yourself. You simply stop participating in a relationship that required you to abandon yourself just to keep someone else comfortable. And suddenly, they feel something unfamiliar: rejection. Not because you insulted them, not because you attacked them, but because for the first time, they reach for the door and discover it no longer opens from their side. The Stoics understood something most people learn painfully late. You cannot control whether someone values your presence, but you can control whether you continue offering it where it is repeatedly treated as disposable. There's a difference between punishment and withdrawal. Punishment says, "I want you to hurt." Withdrawal says, "I finally understand this is hurting me." Those two things may look identical from the outside, but inside, they are worlds apart. And this distinction will matter later, because if you're disappearing only to make them chase you, you haven't actually left. You're still standing emotionally outside their door, waiting to hear footsteps. Part 2, the void. They begin to notice what is missing. The second stage arrives quietly. Usually, in ordinary moments, nothing dramatic happens. They wake up, make coffee, check their phone, go to work, come home, and somewhere between all those familiar routines, something feels wrong. You are missing. Not the dramatic version of you. Not the arguments. Not the difficult conversations. The small version. The message you used to send in the morning. The ridiculous joke nobody else understood. The way you remembered something they mentioned 3 weeks ago. The person they called when the rest of the world became too loud. Those things once seemed insignificant until they stopped happening. This is one of the strangest truths about absence. We often notice someone's value through the empty spaces they leave behind. A chair nobody sits in, a notification that never arrives, a Sunday afternoon that suddenly feels longer than it used to. And now their mind begins comparing new conversations to conversations with you, new people to the way you understood them, new attention to the attention they once received without asking. And comparison is dangerous, because memory has a strange habit. When access disappears, the things they complained about slowly fade, while the things they took for granted become louder. But don't misunderstand this. Their loneliness is not proof that you should return. Someone missing what you gave them is not the same thing as someone becoming capable of loving you properly. That's a distinction many people learn only after returning to the same pain twice. Part 3, curiosity becomes obsession. Then comes the third stage. Curiosity. At first, it's innocent. Where are you? What are you doing? Why haven't you reached out? Then the questions change. Have you moved on? Are you happier? Is there someone else? And finally, the question their ego hates most. Were you better off without me? Before. They knew what you were doing. They knew how you felt. They knew you cared. Now, they know nothing. And the human mind hates an unfinished story. So it starts writing one. They check whether you're online. They look at an old photograph. Maybe they type your name, then close the search. Maybe they ask a mutual friend about you, while pretending the question means nothing. Maybe they return to your profile at 1:17 in the morning, looking for evidence. A photograph, a comment, a new person, anything. Silence creates empty space, and imagination fills empty space faster than facts ever could. This is where many people make a mistake. They see the other person becoming curious and immediately break their silence. They post something specifically for them. A quote, a photograph with someone attractive, a carefully designed message pretending not to be a message. And suddenly, the disappearance becomes a performance. Don't do that. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly returned to one fundamental discipline. Your attention belongs to you. Why surrender it again? By building your life around whether someone is watching? Real silence doesn't announce itself. Real distance doesn't need an audience. If you're checking every hour to see whether they noticed your absence, you're not free. You've simply changed the form of your attachment. Part 4. The mirror turns toward them. Eventually, curiosity becomes uncomfortable, because when they can't get answers from you, they begin looking for answers inside themselves. This is stage 4. Self-reflection. And this is where silence becomes a mirror. They replay conversations. Not all at once. Fragments. That night you tried to explain how distant they had become. The message they ignored. The time you needed them, and they were too busy. The moment you stopped arguing, because you were simply tired. Things that looked small then, begin to look different now. And questions appear. Was I too cold? Did I take them for granted? Why didn't I listen? When did they stop trying? And perhaps the most uncomfortable question, did I lose someone who genuinely cared about me? There is a brutal advantage to absence. You are no longer there to protect them from the consequences of their own behavior. You aren't explaining. You aren't reassuring. You aren't accepting another half apology just to make the tension disappear. They're alone with themselves. Epictetus taught that we suffer not merely from events, but from the judgments we form about them. Now their judgment of the past begins changing. The same memories remain, but suddenly, they see themselves differently inside them. And that's when regret begins. Not necessarily because they have transformed. Be careful. Regret and transformation are not the same thing. A person can regret losing access to you without understanding why they lost you. That's why you don't rush back. Just because someone finally feels uncomfortable. Sometimes discomfort is the first honest teacher they've had. Part 5. They begin to reach for you. Stage 5 is where the roles often reverse. The person who rarely initiated suddenly finds reasons to appear. It usually doesn't begin with, I was wrong. It's smaller. Hey, I was thinking about you. How have you been? Or the classic, I saw something today that reminded me of you. Sometimes, they don't message at all. They like something old, view something quickly, ask about you indirectly. They leave tiny doors open, hoping you'll walk through one. But because uncertainty has become heavier than their pride. For a long time, they assumed you needed them more. Now they're beginning to wonder whether the opposite was true. And here comes your greatest temptation. You see their name appear on your phone, and suddenly every emotion you spent weeks calming wakes up. Your heart says, finally, they understand. Maybe this is what I was waiting for. But stop. Ask yourself one question. What has actually changed? Not, do they miss me? Not, are they afraid of losing me? Not even, do they want me back? What changed? Because longing is an emotion. Change is behavior. And Stoicism teaches us to judge reality by what is actually in front of us, not by the fantasy we desperately want it to become. Someone reaching for you doesn't automatically deserve access to you. And someone missing you doesn't automatically mean they have learned how to keep you. And if you've made it this far, there's a chance this isn't just philosophy for you. There's probably a name, the face, or a conversation sitting somewhere in your mind right now. If this is helping you see that situation more clearly, leave a like. Not for me. Use it as a small reminder to yourself. You don't have to beg for a place where you were never treated like a priority. And if someone you care about is trapped in that exact cycle, share this with them. Sometimes one idea arrives at exactly the moment someone needs it. And subscribe if you want more stories and Stoic lessons like this. Because the next stages are where disappearing becomes dangerous. Not for them, for you. Part 6. Relief turns into regret. At stage 6, something contradictory happens. They may feel relief and regret at the same time. This surprises people, because when you first disappear, the other person may genuinely enjoy the freedom. No difficult conversations, no accountability, no emotional responsibility. They go out, they laugh, they tell themselves, this is better. Maybe they even meet someone new. And for a while, it works. But relief is not always peace. Sometimes, relief is simply the temporary absence of responsibility. Eventually the noise stops. The friends go home. The new attention becomes ordinary. The phone gets quieter. And that's when regret walks into the room. They begin remembering not merely you, but the stability you represented. The person who knew their worst days. The person who showed up. The person they didn't have to impress. And now they face an uncomfortable truth. Novelty is easy to find. Depth isn't. Attention is easy to replace. Trust isn't. Chemistry can happen quickly. History cannot. But again, this is where you must remain clear. Their regret is theirs. You do not need to rescue them from it. The Stoic question isn't, how do I make them regret losing me? It is, why would their regret determine my next action? Part 7. The games begin. Stage 7 is often ugly. Because when direct access fails, the ego looks for another door. Jealousy, distance, cryptic posts, a photograph designed to look effortless, that required 20 minutes to choose. Suddenly they're doing amazing. Suddenly they're surrounded by people. Suddenly their life looks suspiciously perfect. Maybe it's meant for you. This is where the old version of you would react. You'd analyze, compare, wonder, maybe retaliate, maybe post something of your own. And just like that, both of you are communicating without speaking. Two people pretending not to care, while carefully monitoring whether the other person cares. That's not freedom. That's attachment wearing sunglasses. Don't play. The Stoic does not need to win games that should never have been played. If someone wants to communicate honestly, they can communicate honestly. Everything else is noise. And one of the greatest forms of discipline is learning not to respond to every piece of noise that knows your name. Part 8. Silence becomes heavy. Then comes stage 8. Silence. Real silence. Not 3 hours. Not one night. Enough time for them to understand that this may actually be permanent. And permanence changes everything. Before, they thought, they'll come back. Now, what if they don't? That question has weight. Because human beings often postpone appreciation when they believe tomorrow is guaranteed. We'll apologize later. We'll call later. We'll treat them better later. We'll fix it later. Until later disappears. This is why absence can become so psychologically powerful. Not because silence is a weapon, but because silence removes distraction. There is nothing left to argue with. Nothing left to blame. Nothing left to chase away. Only reality. And reality says, that person who was always there may have finally learned how to live without you. Part 9. Fear of losing you for good. Stage 9 is fear. This is where possibility becomes loss. They imagine you moving forward, not pretending to move forward, actually moving forward, laughing without them, sleeping peacefully, building routines they aren't part of, maybe loving someone else someday. And the most painful realization isn't, someone else might have you. You may no longer want what they are finally ready to offer. That's when messages become longer. Apologies become clearer. Pride becomes less important. They may finally say everything you once begged to hear. And perhaps some of it is sincere. People can change. Stoicism does not require you to become cold. It does not demand that you never forgive. But forgiveness and access are two different things. You can forgive someone without returning to the relationship. You can wish them peace without becoming responsible for providing it. You can love someone and still understand that loving them from a distance is healthier than losing yourself beside them. And now we reach the final stage. The one most people misunderstand. Because it isn't really about them anymore. It is about you. Part 10. The moment you stop needing them to miss you. Remember the question we began with? What do they feel when you disappear? Rejection, emptiness, curiosity, regret, the urge to pursue, conflict. They may feel all of those things, but they may not. And that sentence is the beginning of freedom. Because Stoicism was never supposed to teach you how to control someone's reaction to your absence. It teaches you to stop needing that reaction. Read that again in your mind. If you disappear only because you want them to miss you, you're still attached. If you remain silent only because you're waiting for them to chase you, you're still attached. If you're improving yourself so they'll regret losing you, you're still attached. They are still controlling your life without even being in it. That's the trap. Real detachment begins when their reaction stops being the reward. Maybe they miss you. Maybe they don't. Maybe they regret everything. Maybe they move on tomorrow. Those things belong to them. Your character belongs to you. Your choices belong to you. Your peace belongs to you. That is the line Stoicism draws. And this is why I would never tell you. Never love. Never care. Never become attached to another human being. That's not strength. That's fear disguised as philosophy. Love deeply. Be present. Give honestly. But never hand another person the responsibility for your inner peace. Because people change. People leave. Life moves. Everything you love is temporary. The Stoics didn't use that truth as a reason to love less. They used it as a reason to appreciate more, without demanding permanence. So perhaps the strongest moment isn't when they finally text you. It isn't when they admit they were wrong. It isn't even when they beg you to return. The strongest moment is an ordinary morning, when you wake up, reach for your phone, and realize you no longer need to check. You don't need to know whether they watched your story. You don't need to know whether they found someone else. You don't need them to regret losing you. You don't even need them to understand why you left. And suddenly, silence doesn't feel like punishment anymore. It feels like peace. If someone came into your mind while listening to this, don't use this video to punish them. Use it to understand yourself. Am I walking away because I respect myself, or because I'm secretly hoping they'll chase me? The answer may hurt, but it can also set you free. If this message gave you something worth carrying into your own life, leave a like. Share it with someone who has forgotten their worth, while trying to convince another person to see it. And subscribe if you want to keep exploring Stoicism, not as a collection of cold quotes, but as something you can actually use when life becomes painful. And before you leave, write one sentence in the comments. I choose peace over attention. Not for them, for you. Because the day you stop needing someone to miss you may be the day you finally stop missing yourself.